Hello, friends. This is Dave Hurwitz, executive editor at ClassicsToday.com, here with a little chat. Recently I've been listening to the film score to King Kong by Max Steiner, which was composed in 1933. And, it's widely praised as the score that invented film music as we know it. Max Steiner himself said that wasn't necessarily true. There were always other things that had music attached to them in various ways. But this, you got to start somewhere, right? You always got to draw the line and say, okay, this is where it began. And so history has generally said this is where it began, and it's close enough as makes no difference. The point being that, it over the past, I don't know, 3 or 4 decades, I have seen the rise of film music as a medium to be taken seriously by classical music lovers, by the world of classical music. Part of this has come about for the most basic of all reasons: money. Yes, money, because film music is popular. Often soundtracks sell in the millions. Classical music recordings sell in the, tens. and so, if you can do films and synchronize the scores to the films and things, these things that orchestras have put on have been extremely popular and done very, very well, and rightly so. And they've attracted new audiences. And I don't know how many people already in just the few years I've been here have written to me and said, well, I first got into classical music because I heard symphonically scored films. And this was certainly one of the first of those. I mean, without a doubt. This score, King Kong by Steiner, is symphonically conceived. The characters all have Wagnerian leitmotifs, including Kong himself. He's a 3-note descending chromatic scale. That's Kong. And it's 72 minutes of music, which, granted, in the film is not so continuous, but in the conception and unity of what Steiner wrote, it plays wonderfully when heard continuously. It has big climaxes, patterns of tension and release, recurring ideas, as I pointed out, leitmotifs. They get developed in various ways and transformed in a Lisztian or Wagnerian operation of sorts. And it's absolutely marvelous. And this is the Naxos recording, which was made in 1996. So why did it take till 1996 before people cared enough about this music to start trying to restore it? It had to be restored. I mean, because the actual scores and parts were all over the place, and it's quite a project by John Morgan. Thank you for him. Anyway, here's the bottom line. The problem, it seems to me, is that for generations we have had two incompatible notions of what constitutes greatness. Because make no mistake, the great film composers were great composers. They were, but they weren't considered great classical composers. And the reason, I think, has to do with our rather warped notions, isn't warped. I mean, they're legitimate notions. They are. I can't come out and say that they're stupid, but you'll see what I mean. There is a musical hierarchy, right? And part of that hierarchy I'm very sympathetic with. At the top is music that exists purely for itself. That is, it is non-programmatic. It's not about anything particularly. It simply does its thing as music, and we listen to it in that sense. It's not that it's intellectual, it's expressive. It often expresses very deep emotions, but it does it purely through the medium of music in a way which is verbally specific. Then you have program music which is about something. It tells a story, but it still does it in an instrumental way without the intervention of words or a pure text, so that there's this freedom we have to experience the emotions of the music directly without having to worry about the details. Is this the part where he has breakfast? Or is this the part where they shoot each other? Or, that kind of thing. You just feel the music. And that's the essence of it, right? The music that is just there to be felt for what it is gets the highest marks. It's music of aesthetic purity and purity of essence, as they would say in Dr. Strangelove. So there's that. Then below that, the program music, there's music that accompanies words. Now, this is where things start to get a little bit interesting and muddy, because there you have songs, of course, and you have opera and oratorio, all of the vocal stuff. And for this reason, because the music is repurposed in a sense, the opera and vocal music people have sort of detached themselves from the abstract people, and they have their own universe that they exist in. Because really, you wouldn't say that Wagner is a lesser composer than Brahms, because Wagner's music accompanies text and Brahms's symphonies and chamber music does not. Brahms was actually mostly a composer of vocal music as well, something most people don't like to think about because that's not what he's famous for. He's famous for his aesthetic purity. Whereas Wagner wrote film scores, essentially. His music describes or underlines dramatic action and text throughout. So there you have this, the source of that huge 19th century war between the Wagnerites and the Brahmsiites, because what Wagner proved was that he could beat the aesthetic purists at their own game. That is, write music of such greatness and integrity and consistency and symphonic rigor that the aesthetic purists had a real fight on their hands. It's not a question of who won. It's just a question of, okay, each had equal validity and was equally great. But from thence, there has been this bifurcated standard of greatness. And so below the opera and all that stuff is music which is purely accompanimental, purely to be heard in the background and to create atmosphere. And in that sense, we have theater music, incidental music, and film music. Now, there is also a difference between incidental music and film music, which puts film music even lower on the scale. And that's this. A lot of the incidental music, theater music, like Grieg's Peer Gynt and stuff like that, consists of music which is heard during the play and music which introduces and is heard between acts in the play, entr'actes, intermezzos, overtures. Those are pieces of pure music, and programmatic music usually, but pure-ish music, because nothing's happening while they're playing. And a lot of incidental music consists of those bits, the bits which actually are pure music, whereas, some of it consists of, things that happen over dialogue or other actions going on. In the Hall of the Mountain King, we've got a chorus screaming, kill him, and he's running around, and trolls are zipping about, and okay. So it's a mixture. But film music is almost entirely of the latter sort. That is, music that happens while the primary attention is visual, not your ears, your eyes. You're watching something on the screen. The music is accompanying, amplifying. It may actually make the scene. It may be essential to the success of the film, the scene, the whole thing. But nonetheless, you are particularly and specifically engaged in the act of seeing, not hearing. And so that means that the music is subordinate. And film composers understood that, of course. That does not mean, however, and this is the corollary, that the music that they wrote was in any way deficient in musical qualities. Because when taken away from the visuals, quite often it has a very, very powerful and legitimate and successful and satisfying independent existence, because these folks were musicians first and foremost, but they were not purists. They were eclectics, and eclecticism is bad in our Western tradition. That's why people hated composers like Mahler originally, because he was an eclectic, or people like Charles Ives, people who threw everything but the kitchen sink into their music. It did not have aesthetic purity. I mean, eclecticism was aesthetically, inextricably tied with charges of or prejudice, with anti-Semitism, with the idea that foreign cultures were invading the pure body of German or French, or pick a nationality of that kind of art, which would otherwise be absolutely lily white, and absolutely pure if it weren't for those naughty, nasty eclectics. And music history and musicology, particularly musical analysis, is not prepared to deal with the implications of an eclectic musical style. It can deal with pure musical styles, because pure musical styles are reducible to rules of harmony, rules of counterpoint, rules of form, and you can analyze them and talk about them endlessly and build huge edifices of rhetoric around the sophistication of the composer's subtle handling of rules. Well, film music is different. It's just different. And what we have not been able to value, and this is sort of the key point when it comes to film music composers, is that the essence of their greatness cannot, by definition, lie in their handling of traditional forms, of counterpoint, of that kind of stuff. It rests in their versatility, their ability to maintain some kind of identity of quality, of sound, of procedure, of something, but at the same time being completely chameleon-like and subordinate to the needs of the film, to the location of the film, to the style of the film. I mean, the big symphonic score before King Kong that Max Steiner wrote was something called Symphony of the 6 Million or something like that, which was a film about Jewish immigrants. And, I mean, what could be further from Skull Island than Manhattan's Lower East Side, and the use of, Jewish and Slavic melodies and things like that? The materials that film music composers use can come from anywhere and anything, and they have to subordinate whatever their personal predilections are. They must address the need to illustrate or illuminate the project at hand. And so greatness in a film composer lies in their ability to do just about anything, to find music, good music, quality music, coherent music, beautiful music, for just about any topics that they don't normally choose themselves. And so they were regarded as the lowest of the low. I mean, absolutely, the people for whom music was just a job and a chore and like scenery, something that you just stuffed into the film. And it's only been, I don't know, in the past couple of decades that we've begun, that is, the classical music universe has begun to wrap its brains around this other aspect of musical greatness, that is this versatility. And we've discovered that composers like Steiner or Bernard Herrmann or Korngold or Goldsmith or Elmer Bernstein or Danny Elfman, they have the ability to get the job done, but also to write music which is theirs, which has the qualities we look for in great music. That is, character, personality, as well as consistency and all of that stuff. But it really is an amazing thing. I think that, and I really think, the most wonderful thing about it, for me anyway, is that the quality of greatness that we recognize in these great film music composers is something that has not come from the classical mainstream. It's come from classical music lovers, people whose approach to music is simply, I don't give a damn who wrote it or what it's about, as long as it's great music, as long as I like it. And we've discovered that the love of film music is not incompatible with one's love of great music more generally, music whose greatness resides in its aesthetic purity. Wow, that's a good thing, isn't it? Because it's a populist movement it's a good populist movement. There's good populist and bad populist. We're not going to go into that. But the bottom line is that good populist, in the case of music and the arts, is generally the result of knowledgeable people voting with their ears, in the case of music. And the people who are sophisticated film music lovers are sophisticated music lovers, period. And there isn't any difference because they don't have any problem with the eclecticism. Now, for that to be possible, for what's happened now, I think, to be possible, we've had to see a general weakening in the aesthetic rules or laws or standards or, what we've been taught, the standard script, to take a film music analogy, as to what great music is. It has weakened. It's weakened, and that's had its advantages and its disadvantages, as with everything. Because the result has been that there's been a lot of really crappy classical music being written. People always say, who are the great composers today and what are they doing? Because composers, first of all, went through the horrible avant-garde moment when anything went. And the idea was just to be different, in the name of progress for its own sake, and be audiences be damned. And then there is a fact that even though tonality is kind of back, classical music composers are having a terribly difficult time trying to write works in large forms. They're doing it, of course. They're doing it. But to do it, and to write tonal music while tossing away sonata form and tossing away traditional, the traditional rules and laws of harmony and all that counterpoint and all that stuff, while trying to be both modern and some aspect of tradition, is causing them no end of aggravation, because they're going to be compared unfavorably to the great works of the past, which do all of those things and do them very, very well, because there was a system in place that allowed composers to work and achieve greatness within that system. And so there's no real difference between many modern pieces of orchestral music with titles, whatever they're called. I mean, let's leave aside works that purport to be symphonies and concertos and things. But, blobs of orchestral music called, whatever they're called, and film music, which does the same thing, but which is completely honest about how it does it. It gleefully avails itself of every possible means and mode to communicate its intent, whereas more serious things are basically defined negatively by what they don't do, by what they pretend not to be, by what they're afraid of sounding like. Great music has never been created out of fear. So what are we seeing? What we're seeing is a slow and gradual merger of the old version of greatness, the aesthetic purity, whatever rules and procedures version of greatness, with the newer concept of greatness, that is openness, eclecticism, color, timbre, imagination, versatility, all of those things. Because the bifurcation which happened in the 19th century between the Wagner camps and the Brahms camps was artificial to begin with. I mean, however, legitimate and justified at the time, it was a bad thing for our conception of music generally, because it created categories that had no need to exist. They were just there for people to be partisans and scream about and carry on about and join various cults or parties or however you want to put it. And so today I see, and I may be wrong, but what I see, and you heard it here first, well, not first, but you heard it here, in any case, is a gradual reunification of our concept of what musical greatness should be. That is an enlargement, let's put it that way, of what musical greatness can be, and an acceptance of different modes, different approaches to the summit, to the Parnassus. And the Parnassus, of course, is musical expression. Music which moves us, music which touches us, music which becomes part of our lives, in which we feel deeply, and which goes straight through your gut without the intervention of anything else. In that sense, the purists had a point. You got to remember, they weren't wrong. This wasn't a right or wrong thing. This was a preference thing. It was a philosophical thing. But underlying it all is great music affects us. It reaches us directly. And the great film composers were as good at doing that as the great composers of anything. Period. Exclamation point. And so I just wanted to throw this out there and share it with you because I think we're living in very interesting times. I've always said I am not a supporter of the doom and gloom side of classical music. The people who say, that everything's bad, the arts are in trouble, and everything sucks. And it's, it's so tiresome to hear those people when what we have are amazing arts institutions and organizations, fabulously talented musicians, scads of great composers, and just bucket loads of great music that we haven't even listened to or assimilated or discovered that's already been written, never mind the stuff that has yet to be written. I don't think we're in such bad shape. I just think we have to adjust our perspectives so that we can recognize greatness wherever we hear it. And that seems to me a very worthwhile thing to do. So there you have it. That's my thought on the revenge of the film industry, the film music composers, and our differing modes of musical greatness as they exist today. The State of the Union, if you want to call it that. Keep on listening, friends. Thank you so much for joining me. And please feel free to share your view on this topic. I think there'll be a very interesting discussion. Take care.